In the frozen dawn of February 2nd, 1502, a piercing cry sliced through the stone corridors of Este Castle in Ferrara. Not of fear or agony, but of something far more unsettling. A ritual of power so intimate, it reshaped the destiny of Renaissance Italy. As guards lowered their eyes and courtiers exchanged tense glances, the air, thick with the scent of wax and winter frost, carried the weight of a secret that would remain buried in Europe's archives for nearly 5 centuries. Under a blood-red moon, in a ducal chamber draped in crimson velvet, a 22-year-old woman transformed her body into a weapon of diplomacy. Her every sigh a currency that could topple dynasties or cement empires. This was no mere wedding night. It was a meticulously staged act of political warfare, where the consummation of marriage became a battlefield for survival. The woman was Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, twice widowed by political murders, now wielding her sensuality with lethal precision. The event, whispered about in 3 cryptic words by a royal chancellor, was a protocol so sexually explicit and strategically vital that it altered Italy's balance of power. This is the story of how one night of carefully observed intimacy turned Lucrezia from pawn to predator, a tale locked away until dusty manuscripts revealed its truth. The year was 1502, the zenith of Borgia influence, when Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, held Italy in his grip through marriages that turned his children into chess pieces. The diarium of Johann Burchard, his master of ceremonies, paints a Vatican alive with ambition, its marble halls echoing with whispered deals and the clink of gold. Italy was a fractured mosaic of rival powers: Ferrara, Milan, Naples, and the Papal States, bound by fragile alliances sealed not in council rooms, but between silk sheets. Marriage was not love, it was survival, a contract where failure meant death or disgrace. For the Este family of Ferrara, the stakes were existential. Duke Ercole, as chronicled by Ferrarese court records, staked his dynasty's future on this union with the Borgias, his son Alfonso d'Este the instrument of that gamble. Negotiations, finalized on December 30th, 1501, as noted in papal archives, revealed the marriage's transactional core. Lucrezia's dowry of 100,000 gold ducats, a fortune that could fund cities, was a mere prelude to the true price: her body, offered in a ritualized act to secure the alliance. The letters of the Venetian ambassadors describe the deal as a bond forged in gold and flesh, underscoring the era's brutal pragmatism. Renaissance marriage was a diplomatic theater where consummation was never private. Court records from Ferrara and Mantua show secret protocols demanded witnesses to confirm the act, ensuring dynastic legitimacy. Failure to consummate, as seen in the annulment of Margaret of Austria's marriage to Juan of Aragon in 1497, could unravel alliances, as chronicled by Spanish envoy Diego de Mendoza. Lucrezia entered this arena scarred but unbowed. At 22, her beauty, described by poet Pietro Bembo as rare and luminous, was matched by a blood-stained reputation. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza in 1493 ended in annulment. His alleged impotence a public humiliation, as recorded by Stefano in Fissura. Her second, to Alfonso of Aragon, ended in his strangulation in the Vatican in 1500, a murder widely attributed to her brother Cesare, per Burchard's accounts. These tragedies forged her. As historian Sarah Bradford notes, Lucrezia learned early that survival demanded cunning. Emotionally, the weight of her past, betrayal, loss, and public shame likely fueled a steely resolve. As modern trauma studies suggest, survivors often develop acute strategic instincts. Her new husband, Alfonso de Este, 25, was a stark contrast, a soldier-engineer who forged cannons with his hands, as Ferrarese chronicler Bernardino Zambati describes, yet played the viol with courtly grace. His raw power, detailed in court letters praising his artillery designs, made him a Renaissance ideal, blending warrior strength with princely refinement. Their unexpected meeting at Bentivoglio on January 3, 1502, sparked genuine attraction, as a Ferrarese envoy's letter reveals. Their eyes met with a fire unscripted by politics. This chemistry, rare in arranged unions, complicated the cold calculus of their marriage, setting the stage for a night where duty and desire collided. The cultural context of Renaissance Italy amplified the stakes. Marriages, as historian Christopher Hibbert explains, were treaties. Their success measured in heirs and alliances. The Este Borgia union was a linchpin in a web of rivalries, with France and Spain watching closely, as Venetian dispatches note. Lucrezia's dowry, equivalent to millions today, was a public investment, its repayment expected in the bedchamber. The emotional toll on Lucrezia, entering Ferrara with the weight of 2 failed marriages, was immense. Her fear of failure, as suggested by psychological insights, likely sharpened her focus. The castle, its stone walls iced with frost, stood as a fortress of expectation. Its tapestries depicting ancient victories, a reminder of the dynasty she must uphold. As Ferrara prepared for the wedding, the stage was set for a performance where every gesture carried the weight of empires. And Lucrezia, no stranger to survival, was ready to wield her body as both shield and sword. The winter sun hung low over Ferrara on February 1st, 1502. Casting long shadows across the city's cobbled streets as Lucrezia Borgia's triumphal procession wound through cheering crowds. Clad in a French gown lined with ermine, her neck glittering with diamonds and rubies, she was a vision of grace, yet her luminous beauty, as poet Pietro Bembo described, masked a survivor's steel. The Chronicles of Ferrara by Bernardino Zambati captured the spectacle. The city roared as if welcoming a queen. The whispers of her past followed like a shadow. The air, sharp with frost and the scent of burning braziers, carried the weight of expectation. Tomorrow's wedding night would not be a private affair, but a dynastic sacrament, staged to bind the houses of Borgia and Este. The chosen date, February 2nd, was no accident, aligning with the Feast of the Purification of the Virgin Mary, a Catholic holy day that fused sanctity with the carnal, as noted in church records. This paradox, divinity cloaking a political ritual, made the consummation a sacred act, its success vital to both families. The letters of the Venetian ambassadors underscore the symbolism. The Borgias and Estes wove heaven and earth into their union, making the bed a battlefield for God and power. In Renaissance Italy, aristocratic marriages demanded more than vows, so they required proof, as chronicler Paolo Giovio explains. Consummation was a public deed witnessed to guard against annulment. Secret protocols detailed in Ferrarese court archives mandated silent observers, chancellors, scribes, even spies, to record the act, ensuring heirs could be born and alliances secured. Among them was Isabella de Este's own chancellor, placed by the Duchess to turn intimacy into political intelligence, a calculated act of espionage. As a Mantuan letter reveals, Isabella seeks proof to wield against her rival. This was no mere gossip. It was a weapon in the cutthroat world of Italian politics, where a failed marriage could spark war. Lucrezia, at 22, bore the scars of her past. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza in 1493, annulled for his alleged impotence, had left her humiliated, as Stefano in Fissura's diaries note. She was mocked as a bride untouched. Her second to Alfonso of Aragon ended in his murder in 1500, likely by her brother Cesare, as Burchard's diarium records. These betrayals, as historian Sarah Bradford suggests, forged a woman who learned to wield vulnerability as power. Psychologically, modern trauma studies indicate such experiences could sharpen strategic instincts, and Lucrezia's poise in Ferrara, smiling for the crowd while knowing her every move was watched, reflected a survivor's cunning. Her husband, Alfonso d'Este, 25, was her opposite, yet her equal. A soldier who forged cannons, as Zambatti describes, he also played the viol with courtly finesse, embodying the Renaissance ideal of strength and refinement. Their meeting at Bentivoglio on January 3, 1502, had kindled an unexpected spark. As a Ferrarese envoy wrote, "Their glances held a warmth no diplomat could script." This genuine attraction, rare in arranged unions, added a volatile edge to the ritual ahead, where passion would mingle with duty under the gaze of witnesses. The cultural context of Renaissance Italy amplified the stakes. Marriages were treaties, as Christopher Hibbert notes, their success measured in heirs and stability. The Este Borgia alliance, sealed with Lucrezia's 100,000 ducat dowry, was a bulwark against rivals like Milan and Naples, as Venetian dispatches confirm. A parallel lies in the 1491 marriage of Beatrice d'Este to Ludovico Sforza, where witnessed consummation ensured Milan's alliance with Ferrara, as recorded in Sforza archives. Yet Lucrezia's union carried unique weight. Her Borgia name, tainted by scandal, made proof of legitimacy critical. Isabella d'Este, Alfonso's sister-in-law and Ferrara's reigning queen, loomed as a rival. Her chancellor's presence, as Mantuan records hint, was no mere formality, but a bid to undermine Lucrezia, whose beauty and Borgia cunning threatened Isabella's dominance. The emotional toll on Lucrezia was immense. Entering Ferrara, she faced not just a husband, but a court primed to judge her. Modern psychological insights suggest such scrutiny could foster hypervigilance. Yet Lucrezia's grace, noted by Bembo as a light that disarmed, masked her resolve. The castle's ducal apartments, where the ritual would unfold, were a stage of opulence and tension. Crimson curtains framed the bed. Silver candelabras flickered against Flemish tapestries of war and alliance. As Zambatti describes, the chamber was a theater, its curtains hiding spies. This was no private sanctuary, but a courtroom where every gesture would be recorded, every sigh a verdict. Lucrezia, shaped by betrayal, knew failure meant annulment or worse. Her second husband's fate taught her that weakness invited death. Alfonso, too, understood the stakes, his virility a matter of dynastic survival. As Ferrarese records stress, the Este heir must prove his strength, lest rivals strike. The night ahead, blending sacred ritual with political necessity, would test their ability to perform under pressure, their chemistry a wild card in a game where empires hung in the balance. As Ferrara slept under its blood-red moon, the stage was set for a performance that would echo through history, a night where Lucrezia would wield her body not as a pawn but as a sword, carving her place in a world that sought to break her. The ducal apartments of Este Castle, cloaked in crimson velvet and flickering silver candelabras, became a stage on February 2nd, 1502, where every sigh was a verdict and every touch a treaty. As Ferrara slept under a blood-red moon, Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este entered their wedding night, not as mere bride and groom, but as actors in a ritual that would bind two dynasties or shatter them. The Chronicles of Ferrara by Bernardino Zambati describe the chamber. Tapestries of war and triumph hung heavy, the bed a theater for power. This was no private act, but a performance rooted in centuries of aristocratic custom, where consummation was a certificate of legitimacy, proving heirs could be born and alliances secured. The letters of the Venetian ambassadors note the stakes. The Este Borgia union must be sealed in flesh, or rivals will tear it apart. Witnesses, hidden in the shadows, scribes, courtiers, and Isabella d'Este's own chancellor, stood ready to record every detail, their quills poised to validate or destroy. Lucrezia, at 22, knew the weight of this moment. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza, annulled in 1497 for his alleged impotence, had branded her with public shame. As Stefano Infisura's diaries record, she was called barren, though the fault was not hers. Her second, to Alfonso of Aragon, ended in his murder in 1500, likely by her brother Cesare, as Johann Burchard's diarium confirms. These scars, as historian Sarah Bradford writes, taught her that weakness in the bedchamber was death in politics. Psychologically, modern trauma studies suggest such betrayals could forge a survivor's instinct for control. And Lucrezia, her luminous beauty a weapon, entered this night determined to dominate. Alfonso, 25, was her equal in resolve. A soldier who forged cannons, as Zambati details, he also played the violin with grace, his strength tempered by refinement. His virility was known, but knowledge wasn't enough. It had to be proven. As Ferrarese court records stress, the heir must show his potency lest the dynasty falter. Their meeting at Bentivoglio on January 3rd had sparked genuine attraction, a rare flame in arranged unions, as a Ferrarese envoy noted. Their eyes held a fire beyond duty. This chemistry, now harnessed under scrutiny, charged the ritual with an intensity neither church nor state could fully control. The first consummation, as recorded in court archives, carried a jolt of real passion mixed with necessity. The letters of Mantua hint at the moment. What was staged became alive, their desire a force unscripted. For Lucrezia, this was no mere act, but a reclamation of agency. Her body a shield against the annulments and murders of her past. Alfonso, under the weight of dynastic expectation, performed with the same discipline he brought to battle. His composure a testament to his steel, as modern psychological insights suggest high-pressure performance can mirror military precision. The second consummation, noted by Isabella's chancellor, was closely monitored, every sound a political testimony. To outsiders, this scrutiny might seem invasive, but in Renaissance Italy, as historian Christopher Hibbert explains, the bedchamber was a courtroom, its verdict binding empires. A parallel lies in the 1494 marriage of Bianca Maria Sforza to Emperor Maximilian I, where witnesses ensured legitimacy, as Milanese archives record, though Lucrezia's night carried the added weight of her Borgia stigma. The third and final act, documented in Ferrarese records, sealed the ritual. It was no longer just a union of bodies, but the forging of a new axis of power. As the Venetian dispatches state, the Este and Borgia are one, their bond unbreakable by rivals. Lucrezia's survivor instincts, honed by years of betrayal, shone through. Her performance was not just submission, but strategy, turning vulnerability into strength. Alfonso's endurance, proving his virility, silenced whispers of inadequacy that had doomed others, like Giovanni Sforza. The emotional toll was immense. Lucrezia, watched by spies like Isabella's chancellor, likely felt the sting of exposure, yet her poise, as Bembo's poetry praises, disarmed even her enemies. Alfonso, bearing the Este legacy, faced pressure that could crush lesser men, as psychological studies note such public tests of masculinity can induce acute stress. The cultural context amplified the stakes. Renaissance marriages, as Hibbert notes, were treaties signed in flesh, their failure inviting war or disgrace. A similar ritual in the 1487 marriage of Clarice Orsini to Lorenzo de' Medici, as Florentine records show, required witnesses to secure the Medici dynasty, but Lucrezia's night was uniquely fraught, her Borgia name a lightning rod for scrutiny. The chamber, its air heavy with myrrh and tension, was both sanctuary and stage, the tapestries a reminder of the wars this union aimed to prevent. Isabella's chancellor, as Mantuan letters reveal, scribbled notes that would later fuel her rivalry, turning intimacy into ammunition. Yet Lucrezia and Alfonso triumphed, their three acts a defiant proof of legitimacy. As Ferrari's archives confirm, the marriage is sealed, the dynasty secured. This night, blending passion and politics, was not just a ritual, but a revolution, transforming Lucrezia from a tainted pawn into a force who wielded her body as a sword, and Alfonso into the unassailable heir of Ferrara, their union a beacon of power in a fractured Italy. As dawn broke over Ferrara on February 3, 1502, the ducal apartments of Este Castle, still heavy with the scent of myrrh and melted wax, bore silent witness to a transformation. The night's ritual, meticulously recorded by scribes and spies, had forged an unbreakable bond between the houses of Borgia and Este, its echoes rippling far beyond the crimson-curtained bedchamber. Lucrezia Borgia, once a pawn in her father Pope Alexander VI's schemes, emerged not just as a bride, but as an architect of power, her body a weapon that secured a dynasty. The Chronicles of Ferrara, by Bernardino Zambati, capture the moment's weight. The union was sealed, its proof etched in ink and flesh. The official records, penned by chancellors including Isabella d'Este's own agent, were more than gossip. They were a binding contract, a shield against annulment. As the letters of the Venetian ambassadors note, the marriage stands firm, its legitimacy a wall against rivals. This night, blending passion and politics, had turned Lucrezia from a tolerated outsider into an essential pillar of the Este court, her survival now tied to the dynasty's own. Alfonso d'Este, his virility and resolve proven under scrutiny, stood as Ferrara's unassailable heir, his performance a triumph that silenced whispers of weakness. As Ferrari's court archives confirm, the prince proved his strength, and the house endures. The emotional toll on both was profound. Lucrezia, watched by hidden eyes, had bared her soul as much as her body, her poise a mask for the scars of past betrayals, as modern trauma studies suggest survivors often channel pain into strategic resilience. Alfonso, bearing the weight of his family's legacy, had performed with the discipline of a soldier, his composure under pressure akin to his battlefield tactics. As psychological insights indicate, high-stakes public acts can mirror military precision. The cultural context of Renaissance Italy amplified the stakes. Marriages were treaties, as historian Christopher Hibbert writes, their success measured in heirs, and as Venetian dispatches record. France and Spain now see Ferrara as untouchable. A parallel lies in the 1491 marriage of Beatrice d'Este to Ludovico Sforza, where documented consummations secured Milan's alliance. As Sforza archives note, but Lucrezia's union carried the added burden of her Borgia stigma, making its success a defiant rebuke to her critics. The archival records, preserved in Ferrara's state papers, were a legal fortress, each consummation witnessed and notarized, ensured no rival could challenge the marriage's validity, a tactic used in the 1480s by the Gonzaga family to protect their unions, as Mantuan records show. Lucrezia's transformation was seismic. Once mocked as a tainted pawn after her annulled marriage to Giovanni Sforza and the murder of Alfonso of Aragon, as Stefano Infisura's diaries recount, she now held a power her enemies could not deny. Her survival, as historian Sarah Bradford notes, depended on turning vulnerability into strength. And this night made her indispensable. The Este dynasty's future rested on her ability to bear heirs, her death a threat to stability. The letters of Mantua hint at the court's shift. Lucrezia is no longer a guest but a force. Yet not all rejoiced. Isabella d'Este, Ferrara's reigning queen, saw her influence threatened. Her chancellor's notes, as Mantuan archives reveal, were meant to undermine Lucrezia, but the marriage's success turned them into feudal weapons. The rivalry, sparked at their first meeting in Malaburgo in 1501, as a Ferrarese envoy describes, ignited a silent war of glances and whispers. Isabella, whose beauty and intellect had long dominated the court, now faced a rival whose triumph in the bedchamber reshaped the power dynamic. As modern psychological studies suggest, such rivalries can fuel intense emotional conflict. The geopolitical fallout was immediate. The Este Borgia bond, as the Venetian dispatches state, redrew Italy's alliances, forcing France and Spain to tread carefully. Treaties were renegotiated, trade routes adjusted, and military plans redrawn around this new power bloc. Rivals who had hoped for failure, hoping to exploit Lucrezia's scandalous past, as chronicler Paolo Giovio notes, were left powerless against the documented proof of legitimacy. The emotional resonance for Lucrezia was profound. For the first time, she was untouchable, her place in Ferrara secured not by her father's gold, but by her own strategic brilliance. Alfonso, too, emerged stronger, his reputation as Ferrara's heir cemented. As Zambatti writes, "The prince's strength is no longer questioned, his line assured." The night's success was a public victory, its records a shield against the annulments and assassinations that had plagued Lucrezia's past. The castle, its stone walls still echoing with the night's intensity, stood as a fortress of a new reality. Lucrezia, once a victim of her father's schemes, had wielded her body as a sword, carving a place of power in a world that sought to break her. Yet the triumph was not without cost. Isabella's silent war, as Mantuan letters hint, would simmer, and the weight of producing heirs loomed. The stage was set for a court where every gesture was a move in a deadly game, and Lucrezia, now a force, was ready to play. The triumph of February 2nd, 1502, had redrawn the map of Ferrara's court, but its reverberations shook the very foundations of Renaissance Italy. Lucrezia Borgia, now cemented as an indispensable figure in the Este dynasty, stood at the heart of a new power bloc, her body the linchpin of an alliance that forced rival duchies to recalibrate their ambitions. The letters of the Venetian ambassadors capture the shift. The Borgia-Este bond is a fortress, its strength proven in the bedchamber, unassailable by Milan or Naples. Yet the triumph was not without shadows. The court, glittering with torchlight and intrigue, became a battleground for a silent war between Lucrezia and Isabella d'Este, whose rivalry, as a Ferrarese envoy noted, burned hotter than the braziers in the castle halls. The geopolitical fallout was seismic. France and Spain, as chronicled in diplomatic dispatches, adjusted treaties and military plans to account for this consolidated power, while smaller states like Mantua watched warily, as recorded in their court archives. Ferrara stands taller, its union a shield against invasion. Rivals who had banked on Lucrezia's scandalous past, her annulled marriage to Giovanni Sforza in 1497, and the murder of Alfonso of Aragon in 1500, as Stefano Infessura's diaries recount, found their hopes dashed. The documented consummation, preserved in Ferrari's records, was a legal bulwark, its meticulous notes a barrier against annulment or slander, a tactic mirrored in the 1490s Gonzaga marriages. As Mantuan archives show, Lucrezia's newfound power was palpable. Once a pawn in her father Pope Alexander VI's schemes, she was now, as historian Sarah Bradford writes, a force who turned vulnerability into dominion. Her emotional journey, shaped by betrayal and loss, likely fueled a hypervigilant resilience. As modern trauma studies suggest, survivors often develop acute strategic instincts. Yet the court's tension simmered, particularly with Isabella d'Este, the Duchess, whose beauty and intellect had long reigned supreme, as chronicler Bernardino Zambati describes, saw Lucrezia's triumph as a direct threat. Their rivalry, sparked at Mallobergo in 1501, exploded into subtle gestures and whispered rumors. As Mantuan letters reveal, Isabella's eyes follow Lucrezia like a hawk. Modern psychological insights suggest such rivalries could breed intense emotional conflict, and Isabella's chancellor, who had recorded the wedding night, now fed her intelligence to undermine her rival, though Lucrezia's success rendered it futile. The stakes escalated on September 5, 1502, when Lucrezia, after a grueling labor, gave birth to a stillborn daughter. As Zambati's chronicles record, the court mourned, yet whispers questioned the child's conception. Rumors, fueled by chroniclers like Paolo Giovio, swirled. Had the child been conceived on the wedding night or earlier, during Lucrezia's secret meetings with Alfonso at Bentivoglio? Paternity was not just personal but political. As Ferrari's archives note, a child's origin is a dynasty's proof. Lucrezia's near death from childbed fever, a common peril that claimed many. As medical histories of the era confirm, was a stark reminder of her mortality. Her recovery, hailed by contemporaries as divine favor, as a Ferrari's envoy wrote, proved her strength to bear heirs. Yet the ordeal hardened her, as Bradford suggests. Facing death, she embraced strategy over sentiment. A parallel lies in the 1488 labor of Clarice Orsini, wife of Lorenzo de' Medici, whose survival of childbirth bolstered her status. As Florentine records show, though Lucrezia's Borgia stigma made her recovery a greater triumph, the cultural context of Renaissance Italy amplified the crisis. Childbirth was a battlefield, as historian Christopher Hibbert notes, where noble women's bodies were both treasure and target. The loss of the child sparked gossip, but Lucrezia's survival silenced doubters, her resilience a beacon in a court primed to judge her. The emotional toll was immense. Modern trauma studies indicate near-death experiences can sharpen survival instincts, and Lucrezia, already scarred by her past, emerged more calculating. Isabella, seizing on the tragedy, spread whispers through her network, as Mantuan letters hint, aiming to weaken Lucrezia's standing. Yet Lucrezia's position grew stronger, her role as potential mother of Este heirs making her untouchable. As Zambati writes, her life is the dynasty's life. The geopolitical ripples continued. The Este Borgia alliance, as Venetian dispatches note, forced rivals to redraw trade routes and alliances, with France wary of Ferrara's new strength. A similar shift occurred after the 1494 marriage of Bianca Maria Sforza to Maximilian I, which realigned Italian politics, as Milanese archives record. But Lucrezia's union carried unique weight due to her father's papal power. The court, alive with music and feasts, masked a deeper tension. Lucrezia's triumph had made her a target, her every move watched by Isabella's spies. The stage was set for a new gambit, as Lucrezia, no longer content to merely survive, prepared to wield her charm as a weapon. Her next move, a daring strike that would shake Ferrara's court to its core and redefine her legacy in a world where power was won not just in council rooms, but in the shadows of intimacy. The air in Ferrara's Este castle, thick with the scent of wax and intrigue, bore witness to Lucrezia Borgia's transformation from pawn to power broker. Her triumph in the wedding bed of February 2nd, 1502, now a cornerstone of the Este dynasty. Yet her ascent was not the end, but the beginning of a new gambit, one that would shake the court to its core. By 1503, Lucrezia, hardened by the loss of her stillborn daughter and the brutal lessons of her past, embarked on a daring affair with Francesco Gonzaga, Marquis of Mantua and husband of her rival, Isabella d'Este. The letters of Lucrezia Borgia, uncovered centuries later in Mantuan archives, reveal a relationship born of both passion and calculation. My heart stirs, yet my mind secures. This was no mere dalliance. It was a masterstroke of sexual diplomacy, striking at Isabella's pride while weaving a protective web against her enemies. As historian Sarah Bradford notes, Lucrezia turned intimacy into a shield. The affair, carefully concealed, was seismic, its whispers rippling through Ferrara's tapestried halls. As a courtier's dispatch records, the Duchess's rival has stolen her husband's gaze. For Isabella, the blow was both personal and political, as Mantuan letters describe. Her influence wanes as Lucrezia rises. Modern psychological insights suggest such a betrayal could ignite a visceral need for retaliation, and Isabella's silent war escalated, her spies now tracking Lucrezia's every move. The cultural context of Renaissance Italy made such affairs more than scandal. They were strategy. Aristocratic liaisons, as historian Christopher Hibbert explains, were safety nets, binding allies against betrayal. A parallel lies in the 1490s affair of Caterina Sforza, who used her lover Giovanni de' Medici to secure military support, as Florentine chronicles note. But Lucrezia's choice of Francesco, Isabella's husband, was a calculated dagger, amplifying her power while wounding her rival. The letters of the Venetian ambassadors capture the fallout. Ferrara's court is a chessboard, and Lucrezia plays as a queen. Emotionally, the affair was a tightrope. Lucrezia balanced genuine affection, evident in her tender letters to Francesco, with political cunning, ensuring Mantua's support against threats. Her ability to maintain her marriage to Alfonso d'Este while cultivating this alliance, as Ferrari's records confirm, showcased a mastery of diplomacy that few women of her era achieved. Lucrezia's later years in Ferrara cemented her legacy beyond scandal. As Duchess, she bore Alfonso legitimate heirs, including Ercole II in 1508, as Zambotti's chronicles record. Each child bound her tighter to the dynasty. Her patronage of artists like Titian and poets like Ariosto, detailed in Ferrari's court accounts, transformed her into a cultural beacon, as Bradford writes. She sought redemption in art, shedding her Borgia shadow. Yet the wedding night of 1502 remained her defining moment, its protocol of documented consummation setting a standard for Renaissance alliances. The Annales Ecclesiastici note its spread. The Borgia Este model became law, ensuring unions through witnessed acts. A parallel lies in the 1519 marriage of Catherine de' Medici to Henry of Orleans, where similar protocols secured French alliances, as French court records show. But Lucrezia's night was a pioneer, its archives a blueprint for power. The emotional weight of her transformation was profound. Once a victim of her father's schemes, her annulled marriage to Giovanni Sforza in 1497 and the murder of Alfonso of Aragon in 1500. As Burchard's diarium recounts, Lucrezia emerged as a strategist who turned her body into a fortress. Modern trauma studies suggest such resilience stems from surviving repeated betrayals, and Lucrezia's poise, as poet Pietro Bembo praised, lit the court like a flame. Her affair with Francesco, sustained into the 1510s, as Mantuan letters confirm, was not just revenge, but a safety net, diversifying her alliances as kingdoms diversified armies. Isabella, humiliated, waged a psychological war, as a Ferrarese envoy noted. The Duchess's smiles hide daggers. Yet Lucrezia's heirs and patronage made her indispensable. Her death in 1519 mourned, as Zambotti writes, Ferrara weeps for its duchess, once feared, now loved. The legacy of her wedding night reshaped Renaissance diplomacy, proving that sexuality, when wielded strategically, was as potent as armies. Other women followed: Catherine de' Medici's seduction of French kings and Anne Boleyn's erotic politics, ... as chronicled by French and English records, echoed Lucrezia's model, though her Borgia stigma made her triumph singular. The Venetian dispatches reflect on her impact. Lucrezia proved a woman's body could bind empires. Her story, buried in archives, challenges sanitized histories, as Hibbert notes. The past hides truths too raw for fairy tales. Europe's secret protocols of queens and courtesans who turned intimacy into power remain locked in dusty manuscripts, waiting to unsettle us. Lucrezia's life, from pawn to architect, forces us to question power's cost. If a woman could bend a patriarchal world through courage and cunning, what other secrets lie hidden? Her legacy, etched in Ferrara's stones, whispers that history's truths are not in grand battles, but in the shadowed chambers where empires were truly forged.